What happens when an entire mountain keeps secrets? Deep in the Appalachian ridges, beyond forgotten mining towns and unmarked trails, locals speak in hushed voices about things that shouldn't exist. Lights flickering between ancient trees, whispers carried on winds that blow from no direction, paths that appear at dusk and vanish by dawn. For generations, those who've seen what lurks in these mountains have learned one rule: stay quiet. But silence can't bury the truth forever. Tonight, we're uncovering 7 true horror stories from the Appalachian wilderness. Encounters so disturbing, they'll make you rethink every scenic mountain drive after dark. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. And subscribe to The Wander Warrior for more horror stories that'll keep you up at night. My name is Raymond Cole, and I've been running trucks through West Virginia for 23 years. I know these mountains the way some people know their own backyards. Every hairpin turn on us, minus 19, every truck stop from Beckley to Bluefield, the names of the dispatchers who work nights, which stretches have cell service and which don't. What I've learned, though, is that knowing a place and understanding it are 2 different things. This happened in late October, when the leaves were turning that particular shade of red that looks more like rust than autumn. I was running a load of building supplies from Charleston up toward the Virginia line, a route I'd done 100 times. Should have been routine. 8 hours, maybe 8.5 with traffic. Clean job, decent pay. But dispatch had called it in for a late pickup, which meant I'd be hitting the mountain passes around 2 a.m. That's not ideal, but it's not unusual either. I'd done it before. What I hadn't done before was really pay attention to what the old-timers say about that particular stretch. I picked up the load around 11 p.m. in Charleston and rolled north. The first few hours were fine. 4-lane highway, decent lighting, other traffic. But once I got past Beckley and started climbing into the real mountains, the world changed. The trees pressed in closer. The road narrowed. My headlights seemed to eat the darkness more than push it back, creating this tunnel of visibility that made everything outside feel infinite and hostile. The CB chatter faded out around midnight, not because of bad reception, but because fewer trucks run that time of night on that route. You're mostly alone up there. Around 1:30 a.m., somewhere past the plateau, I stopped at a small truck stop called Ridge Runners. It was one of those places that looks like it hasn't been updated since 1980. 7 wood paneling inside, a counter with maybe 6 stools, coffee that tasted like it had been brewing since yesterday. The guy behind the counter was old, maybe 70, with the weathered face of someone who'd spent his whole life at elevation. His name tag said Frank. Running late, I said, ordering black coffee and a sandwich. Running. 19? He asked. Yeah. Heading to the line. He nodded slowly, like I'd just told him something he already knew. He set down the coffee without looking at me. You hear any whistling up there? He said. You keep driving. I looked up. Excuse me? Whistling, he repeated. 2 notes, real deliberate. High, low, high, low. You hear that? You don't stop. You don't roll down your window. You don't look in your mirrors more than normal. You just drive. What are you talking about? I asked. He glanced toward the window where my rig was parked under the lot lights. There's things in those mountains that shouldn't be, he said quietly. Not animals, not people. Things that live in the hollows and don't come out much. But they know the roads. They know where the trucks go. I thought he was messing with me. You're serious? I said. Serious. As a heart attack, he replied. Lost a driver 3 years ago. Guy from Ohio didn't believe in stories. Broke down on 19 around mile marker 47. Next morning, state found his rig. He was gone. They found his boot though, just one, and his CB was still on, transmitting nothing but this 2-note whistle. High, low, high, low. For 6 hours straight. I paused. That's just coincidence. Maybe, Frank said. He returned to the kitchen without saying anything else. Finished my coffee, paid, and got back on the road at 1:50 a.m. The mountain passes were exactly As bad as I expected, tight turns, steep grades, guardrails that seemed way too close to the edge. My lights picked up the occasional reflective marker, the occasional mailbox, but mostly just rock face and tree line. The fog was starting to roll in too, that thick Appalachian fog that seems to come up out of the ground itself. Mile marker 47 passed without incident. I was halfway thinking that Frank was just one of those old guys who tells scary stories to tourists when I heard it. High, low A, whistle, clear and deliberate, cutting through the background hum of my engine and tires. I checked my mirrors, nothing behind me. The road ahead was empty. The whistle wasn't on the radio. I would have had to have it on. This was just there, in the air. High, low, steady, rhythmic, like someone standing on the side of the road calling. My hands tightened on the wheel, told myself it was a bird, some kind of night bird with an unusual call. Then I heard it again, but this time there was a human quality to it. An intention. High, low, not questioning, commanding. I pressed down on the accelerator. The rig responded, engine growling as I pushed the speed up from 55 to 65. My trailer swayed slightly on a curve, and I eased back just a bit. No point dying in a wreck trying to outrun a sound, but the whistle kept up. High, low. It was moving, I realized. Not staying in one spot. It was keeping pace with me, drifting from one side of the road to the other. Sometimes it sounded like it was ahead of me, sometimes behind. Sometimes so close to my window that I half expected to see a face peering in. Reached for my CB, then stopped. What was I going to say? Anyone else hear this whistle? The other drivers would either think I was crazy or worse, confirm that they knew exactly what I meant. Instead, I kept driving. The fog got thicker. My visibility dropped to maybe 100 yards. The yellow line in the middle of the road became my only anchor to sanity. Everything beyond it was gray murk and dark shapes. High, low, high, low. The whistle was clearer now. Closer, and underneath it, I could swear I heard breathing. Long, slow, patient breaths, like something large and tired was running alongside my truck. I looked in my side mirror. In the fog, just barely visible, was a shape, tall, impossibly tall, gliding, beside the road, keeping perfect pace with my rig. I couldn't make out details, just an outline. Long, thin, wrong somehow. I looked away. When I glanced back, it was closer. "Come on," I whispered, and pushed the speed up to 75. The rig wasn't made for this kind of aggressive driving on a mountain pass, and it started to protest, swaying on the curves, tire scrubbing. But I didn't care. Whatever that thing was, I wasn't stopping. The whistle had stopped. That was somehow worse than hearing it. Crested a ridge and started down the other side. The road straightened out for maybe half a mile, and in that stretch, my headlights swept across something that made my stomach drop. A truck pulled over on the shoulder ahead. An 18-wheeler just sitting there, hazard lights off, no signs of life. As I approached, I could see that it was old, really old, maybe from the 80s. The cab was dark. The trailer was unmarked, rust-red paint flaking off in chunks. My first instinct was to swerve around it and keep going. My second instinct, the one that almost made me stop, was to radio in, make sure the driver was okay. But Frank's voice echoed in my head. "You don't stop. You don't roll down your window." I took my foot off the accelerator and let my rig coast, maintaining distance as I passed the abandoned truck on the left. As I pulled alongside it, I saw something that made my chest tight. The driver's door was hanging open, and in the darkness of the cab, something was moving. I don't know what it was. A hand maybe, or something that looked like one, pale, too many joints, reaching toward the open door like it was trying to decide whether to pull something in or push something out. I hit the accelerator. My rig surged forward, tires squealing slightly. In my mirror, I saw the open door of that old truck disappear into the fog, and above it all, faint but unmistakable high, low. The whistle, distant now, but still there, still calling. I didn't slow down until my GPS told me I was 20 miles north of that stretch. Only then, when I hit a wider section of highway with better light and the occasional other vehicle, did I allow myself to breathe. My hands were shaking so badly I had to pull over at the next rest stop and sit for an hour with the engine off, just trying to get my heart rate down. When I finally made it to the delivery point in the Virginia Panhandle, I sat with the dispatcher for another hour, telling her the whole story. She didn't laugh. She didn't say I was crazy. She just said, "You're not the first." "What do you mean?" I asked. "We've had other drivers report similar things on 19, she said. "In that particular section. Started about 3 years ago. Some say it's a hitchhiker. Some say it's something older. Nobody's ever reported seeing it clearly, just shapes in the fog. And the whistle." "That driver Frank mentioned," I said. "The one who went missing?" She nodded grimly. "His name was David Hollis, from Columbus. Ran the route for 5 years without incident. Then one night..." She shrugged. "He wasn't the first to disappear on that road, and I'd be willing to bet he won't be the last. I haven't run that particular route since. I've heard from other drivers that the abandoned truck is still there, sometimes. Parked on the shoulder, waiting. Sometimes with the door open, sometimes with something visible inside. And if you're running 19 between mile marker 40 and mile marker 60, late at night when the fog rolls in, you might hear it. High, low, A, whistle, patient and deliberate, calling from the darkness. The smart thing, the thing Frank told me, is to keep driving. Don't stop, don't look, don't answer. Because whatever's out there in those mountains, whatever learned to whistle by, listening to the old roads and the old stories, it knows every inch of us minus 19. It knows the places where trucks break down. It knows how long it takes a tow truck to arrive, and it's very, very good at waiting. My name is Raymond Cole. I still drive for a living, but I take the long way around now. Add 4 hours to a run rather than take 19 at night. My dispatcher thinks I'm crazy, but he doesn't argue, because he's heard the whistle too. And some sounds, once you've heard them, you never really forget. They stay with you. They work their way into your dreams. They make you wonder, on foggy nights, what's out there in the dark between the trees learning to call. If you ever find yourself on a mountain road at night and you hear 2 notes, high and low, keep your hands on the wheel. Don't stop. Don't look. Whatever's calling, it's been waiting a long time, and it's very, very patient. Story 2. My name is Clayton Reeves, and I've been hauling loads through Appalachia for 16 years. I know these roads the way a fisherman knows a river. Every bend, every grade, every place where the pavement gets thin and the shoulders crumble into ravines. What I didn't know until last May was that some roads remember things, and some things remember the roads. I was running a refrigerated load from Knoxville up toward Charleston, West Virginia. Perishables, chicken, mostly. The kind of run you don't want to slow down on because every minute the temperature's off, the whole load gets compromised. Dispatch had me on a schedule that meant I'd be climbing through the mountains around 3 a.m., which is when the fog rolls in so thick you can barely see the hood of your truck. I'd done this route maybe 50 times, always made it fine. This time was different. About halfway through the run, somewhere in the Kentucky mountains near the Tennessee border, I stopped at a small place called Mabel's to grab coffee and check my rig. It was one of those old-school truck stops, the kind that's been there since the 70s and hasn't changed much since. Mabel herself was long gone. A woman named Betty ran it now, and she was maybe 60, with the tired eyes of someone who'd seen a lot come through that door. I was paying for my coffee when an old driver came up next to me at the register. He had to be in his 80s, weathered like a piece of driftwood, with hands that shook slightly as he set down his cup. "You heading up 25? He asked me. "Yeah," I said, "toward Charleston." He nodded slowly. "You see any hitchhikers?" he said. "Don't pick them up." "What?" I said. "Hitchhikers," he repeated, "or people standing on the side of the road, especially around mile marker 18, down in that hollow where the road makes those 3 sharp turns. If you see anybody, you don't stop. Betty, the woman behind the counter, glanced up. She didn't say anything, but I saw her jaw tighten. "What kind of hitchhikers?" I asked. The old driver looked at me like I'd asked a stupid question. "The kind that don't want to get where they're going," he said. "The kind that just want to get in your truck." He paid his bill and left without another word. I thought he was just one of those old guys with ghost stories. Every truck stop has at least one. Every driver's heard 100 versions of the phantom hitchhiker. Betty refilled my cup without being asked. "He's not wrong," she said quietly. "About what?" I asked. "About not picking up hitchhikers," she said. "There's been situations on that stretch of 25. "Situations?" I pressed. She glanced toward the back of the store, where an old TV played the news on mute. "A driver stopped for someone about 2 years ago," she said. "Guy from Georgia ran the route regular. He picked up a woman hitchhiking near mile marker 18. The next morning, his truck was found parked in a ravine, engines still running, doors locked from the inside." "What happened to the driver?" I asked. "That's the thing," Betty said. "Nobody knows. He wasn't in the truck, wasn't anywhere nearby. They found his shoe on the cliff edge, but nothing else. The Georgia State Police figured he either jumped or something else happened." "Something else like what?" I asked. Betty didn't answer. She just started wiping down the counter. "I got back on the road around 2:30 a.m. The fog was already thick by the time I hit the real mountains. I -75 merged into us -25, and the road started, doing what it always does up there, getting narrower, windier, scarier, cliff face on one side, 1,000-foot drop on the other. The guardrails are more suggestion than safety. Mile marker 22 passed, mile marker 21, mile marker 19. The fog was so thick now that I was doing maybe 35 miles per hour, just creeping along, watching the yellow line like it was the only real thing left in the world. Then I saw her, standing on the shoulder, just visible at the edge of my headlights. A woman in a light jacket, thumb out, looking cold and tired. She was thin, maybe late 30s, with dark hair plastered to her face. She looked terrified. Every instinct I had said not to stop, every warning I'd just heard echoed in my head. But there was something about the way she looked. Something desperate. Something like she'd been standing there for a very long time. I kept driving. In my mirror, I watched her recede into the fog. I told myself I'd done the right thing. I told myself she was probably fine, probably heading down to the next exit, probably just another traveler who'd gotten stranded. I almost believed it. Mile marker 18. The 3 sharp turns Betty had mentioned. My rig leaned hard into the first curve, tires singing against the asphalt. The fog was so thick I could barely see 20 feet ahead. Then I heard it, a knocking on the sleeper door behind the cab. Knock, knock, knock. I jerked the wheel in surprise, and my truck swerved slightly before I corrected. My heart was hammering. There was nobody in the sleeper. I'd checked it before I left the last stop. There was nobody there. Knock, knock, knock. It came again, louder this time. More insistent. "Who's there?" I called, even though I knew how stupid that sounded. The knocking stopped. In its place, I heard something else. Movement. Inside the sleeper, like something shifting its weight, getting more comfortable. I pulled the truck over at the next wide spot in the road, about a quarter mile past the third turn. My hands were shaking. I grabbed the flashlight from under the seat and climbed out, walked around to the sleeper door. I opened it. The sleeper was empty. Dust motes floated in my flashlight beam. The small bunk, the tiny cabinet, the storage space, all empty. Nothing that could have made that knocking. Nothing that could have shifted. I stood there for maybe 30 seconds, trying to steady my breathing. Then I heard it again. Not from the sleeper this time, from underneath the truck. A slow, deliberate scraping sound, like something with very long fingernails dragging along the undercarriage of my rig, starting at the front bumper and working its way toward the back. Scrape, scrape, scrape. I jumped back into the cab and locked all the doors. My hands fumbled with the ignition. The engine caught, and I didn't even check for traffic before pulling back onto the road. In my mirror, I saw something move away from my truck, a shape, pale and elongated, moving with a gait that wasn't quite human, too many joints, too fluid. It disappeared into the fog before I could see it clearly. I drove. I didn't slow down for the curves. I didn't care about my load anymore. I just drove, watching my mirror every 10 seconds, waiting to see if something was going to reappear. The fog seemed to get thicker the faster I drove. My visibility dropped to almost nothing, and then suddenly I broke through it, the top of the mountain. The fog was below me now, a dark sea that glowed faintly where my headlights caught it. Above, the sky was clearing. I could see stars. I didn't stop driving. When I finally hit a wider stretch of highway with better lighting and truck stops actually open, I pulled over at a Love's and sat in the parking lot for 2 hours, with the engine running and all the lights on inside the cab. I called dispatch and reported a mechanical issue. Told them I'd made it far enough that another driver could take over. I didn't tell them the truth. I didn't tell them about the woman on the shoulder or the knocking or the thing under my truck. I knew they wouldn't believe me. What I did do was call Betty at Mabel's when they opened at 6 a.m. "Did anyone ever find that driver?" I asked. "The one from Georgia?" There was a long pause. "Yeah," she said finally. "They found him about a month later, in a hospital in Knoxville. He didn't remember anything from the day he picked up the hitchhiker until he woke up in the hospital. Said it felt like he'd been asleep for a month, but it was only one night. Doctors couldn't find anything wrong with him. He just quit driving, moved to Florida, and never came back." "What do you think happened?" I asked. "I think," Betty said carefully, "he got into a truck with something that wasn't a woman, and whatever it was, it wanted something from him, or wanted to show him something. And when it was done, it let him go. I never ran that route again. I transferred to a different territory, longer hauls but different roads. I tell dispatch I have a mechanical aversion to I-75 through the mountains and they don't push. But sometimes, late at night when I'm running through empty stretches of highway, I think about that woman on the shoulder. I think about the pale shape I saw moving away from my truck. I think about the old driver's warning and the Georgia trucker who disappeared for a night and came back wrong. I think about how some roads don't just connect places. Sometimes they connect other things, things that wait in the fog, things that know which trucks are running which routes, things that get very good at hitchhiking after they've been doing it for a long time. If you ever find yourself on US-25 in the Kentucky mountains around mile marker 18 in the thick fog in the middle of the night, and you see someone standing on the shoulder with their thumb out, don't stop. Don't look in your mirrors. And if you hear knocking on your sleeper door or scratching underneath your truck, just keep driving. Some passengers you pick up don't ever really want to get out. And some roads in Appalachia remember every single person who's ever disappeared on them. They remember, and they wait, and they keep calling for more. Story 3. I always thought she meant hunters or rough folks with meth labs out in the hollers. I didn't understand she might have meant something else. This happened the summer after my grandmother died, when I went back alone to clear out her place and decide whether to sell it. The house sits on the slope of an old mountain with a narrow gravel road winding down to a 2-lane blacktop and a wall of forest rising behind the backyard like a green cliff. It's a beautiful kind of isolation until the sun goes down. I got there on a Friday afternoon with my hatchback full of boxes, a sleeping bag, and a cheap new hiking GPS I'd bought on the way. I'd been living in cities for years, and part of me was actually excited to be back in that quiet. No neighbors, no traffic, just cicadas and the smell of pine. By evening, I cleared out the kitchen and most of the living room. As the light started to fade, I stepped out on the back porch, looked up at that wall of trees, and remembered the old trail that started at the edge of the yard, 2 worn ruts disappearing into the undergrowth. My grandfather used to call it the logging road, though no one had hauled timber up there since the 60s. I told myself I'd hike it the next day. Make a loop. Get some pictures, post something about back home in the mountains for friends to see. That night, the house didn't feel like home. It's funny what you notice when the person who filled a place is gone. The clock on the wall ticking too loud, the refrigerator humming in an otherwise empty kitchen, the way the boards creak when there's no one there to blame it on. I slept in a sleeping bag on the living room floor. Sometime around 2 a.m., I woke up because the night had gone absolutely silent. No crickets, no frogs, no wind. Just a single sound. Somewhere behind the house, up in the woods, something was walking. The steps were slow and heavy, like a person in boots taking their time, moving through brush. Not crashing, just insisting. A measured crunch, then a pause, another crunch a little to the left. The direction wasn't random. Whoever or whatever it was, they were pacing along the tree line. My first thought was poachers, or someone from town trespassing. I lay there, holding my breath, listening. The steps went on for maybe 2 minutes, then they stopped. I told myself it was a deer, rolled over and forced myself back to sleep. In the morning, the woods looked harmless. Sunlight slanted through the trees, lighting up dust and pollen like gold in the air. I grabbed my backpack, my GPS, a bottle of water, and the old hiking stick my grandfather had carved for me when I was 11. At the edge of the yard, right where grass met leaves, I saw something that made me stop. Footprints, not clear prints like you'd see in mud, but scuffed depressions in the leaf litter where something had passed back and forth. The pattern was wrong for deer or bear, too linear, too deliberate. It looked like someone had walked a tight line along the tree line, turning over leaves with the tips of their boots. I swallowed, told myself it was just from hunters cutting across the property some time ago, and stepped onto the trail. The old logging road climbed steadily, 2 parallel ruts carpeted in moss and dead needles. After 15 minutes, the house was gone from view. After 30, the only sounds were birds overhead and the faint rush of a creek somewhere far below. My GPS showed my path as a neat little line snaking up the contour of the mountain. That reassured me. No matter what my grandmother had said, this was just land. Land can be mapped, measured, understood. Around an hour in, I passed the 3rd ridge. You don't really notice ridges from below, but when you're on foot, you feel each one. A rise, a brief flattening, then another descent. At the crest of the 3rd, the air changed. It felt cooler, stiller, as if the trees here were holding their breath. The undergrowth thinned. The logging road narrowed into more of a game trail. My GPS beeped softly and flickered, recalculating its sense of the world. Signal lost. It flashed for a moment, then came back. I should have turned around. Instead, I kept going. I told myself I'd walk just a little further to where an old fire road was supposed to cut across. My grandfather used to talk about it, a place where he'd seen bear sign. And once, he swore, a set of tracks that walked like a man but weren't. Long toes, he'd said, sipping coffee on that back porch. Longer than any man's got a right to. Heels too narrow, like whatever made him was halfway to being something else. The memory made me smile then. Now, alone in that dim green tunnel of trees, it didn't. Another 20 minutes later, the trail opened into a small clearing, a rough circle where the trees had given way to low ferns and scattered rocks. Sunlight pooled there. It felt like a room with no walls. Right in the middle of the clearing was a cairn, a pile of stones stacked waist high. Too deliberate to be natural, too neat to be random. The rocks were flattish and gray, many of them streaked with something dark brown like old blood. On the top of the pile lay a single object, a deer skull, bleached white, antlers broken off. Someone had carved something into its forehead, 3 vertical lines and a horizontal slash through them, like a crude tally mark. I stood at the edge of the clearing, suddenly aware of how alone I was. The woods around me had gone quiet. No birds, no insects, just the whisper of my own breath and the faint buzz of the GPS in my hand. It beeped again. I glanced down. The map screen had gone blank. My little arrow, which had been pointing confidently up the path, now spun in slow circles, directionless, recalculating. It said, and kept saying. I backed away from the cairn. There are rational explanations for piles of rocks in the woods. Hunters mark trails. Locals build weird art. Teenagers dare each other to make cursed shrines. But the longer I looked at that skull, the less any of those felt right. I turned to head back the way I'd come. The trail was gone. There was still a way through the trees, but it wasn't the same narrow track I'd been following. The ruts were gone. The moss was undisturbed. The only path I could see was a faint suggestion in the ferns, leading not downhill, but sideways along the slope. I felt a cold weight drop into my stomach. I spun in a slow circle. Trees, cairn, trees. Everything looked the same in every direction. The GPS, still in my hand, buzzed once more and went black. No, I muttered. I tapped the screen. Nothing. I held the power button. Nothing. My phone was no help either. No bars, just a spinning wheel where the signal icon should be. I took a deep breath. Getting turned around in the woods is how people die up here, but panic just makes bad decisions worse. I forced myself to think. The trail had been following the contour of the mountain more or less. The house was downslope. If I headed downhill, I'd eventually hit the creek, and from there I could go back along the water until I reached the road. Simple. Except that the moment I stepped off the edge of the clearing, the sense of direction that had always come so easily to me felt muffled, like trying to walk straight in water. Still, downhill is downhill. I picked a line and started walking. The trees closed in immediately, trunks crowding together. The light dimmed, the ground underfoot turned treacherous, loose stones hidden under leaves, roots ready to catch my boots. I focused on the angle of the slope, making sure I was always going down. After 10 minutes, my calves burned. After 20, the ache in my knees told me I'd descended a good distance. Then I stepped out into the clearing with the cairn again, exactly the same circle of ferns, same pool of sunlight, same rock pile, same skull with its carved tally. For a moment, I just stood there breathing too hard. I hadn't turned around. I knew I hadn't. I'd gone in a straight line, as straight as the terrain allowed. But the mountain didn't agree. A wind rose then, sudden and cool, stirring the ferns. It smelled faintly of rot, like old leaves and something underneath them that shouldn't have been there. And then, somewhere between the trees at the far edge of the clearing, something whistled. 2 notes. Not a bird, not quite human. High, low. The sound made my skin crawl. It felt too close, like someone had leaned down and whistled into my ear. Hello? I called because I didn't know what else to do. Is someone there? I'm lost. Silence. Then, from behind me this time, another whistle. High, low. I didn't move. I couldn't tell where it had come from. Above, below, near, far. The acoustics of the clearing twisted the sound, bouncing it around like it was inside a shell. A twig snapped just inside the tree line. I turned toward the sound, heart pounding. Between 2 trunks, in the shadow under a drooping hemlock, something was standing. It was tall, too tall for a person. Thin, but not fragile. The proportions were wrong, arms hanging a little too low, legs a little too long. Its skin, or what I could see of it, was the color of bark washed out by years of rain. Where its face should have been was nothing. Not blank exactly, but indistinct, like someone had taken a blurry photo and pasted it onto a real head. I couldn't make out eyes, or a nose, or a mouth. But I had the overwhelming sense that it was looking at me. We stood there, the 2 of us, on opposite edges of the clearing. Then it lifted one long arm and pointed. Not at me, at the cairn. I followed its gesture with my eyes. On the top of the rock pile, the deer skull had shifted. It was no longer facing the trees, it was facing me. I don't remember deciding to move, I just remember running. Branches whipped at my arms and legs. Rocks slid under my boots. I didn't care about downhill or cross slope anymore. I just ran, crashing through brush, lungs burning, the taste of metal at the back of my throat. Behind me, at uneven intervals, I heard that whistle. High, low. Sometimes it was closer, sometimes further. Once, horrifyingly, it sounded like it was right above me, as if something was moving in the canopy. I stumbled, fell, scrambled back up. At one point, I burst through a clutch of laurel and found myself at the edge of a drop, a sheer rock face dropping 20 feet to a narrow ravine. I grabbed a sapling to keep from pitching over the edge. Across the ravine on the opposite cliff stood the figure. Same height, same two long limbs, same knot face. It cocked its head very slowly, as if curious. Then without a sound, it stepped backward and vanished into the trees. I made it home somehow. One minute I was lost in a forest that felt like it went on forever. The next I was stumbling out into my grandmother's backyard, collapsing on the damp grass, staring up at the familiar outline of the back porch. The sun was low but not gone. I'd been out there for hours. My GPS never turned back on. That night, I packed what I could into the car and slept with my keys in my hand. Around midnight, I woke up to the feeling that someone was watching me through the living room window. The curtains were closed. The porch light was off. Slowly, very slowly, I reached out and turned on the lamp beside my sleeping bag. The knocking came 3 seconds later, not on the door, on the wall. 3 measured knocks right behind my head, as if something was standing just outside the house, pressing its hand flat against the boards. I didn't move, didn't breathe. After a long minute, I heard it again. High, low, the whistle, faint but unmistakable, just beyond the wall. At dawn, I left. I didn't wait for the lawyer to finish the paperwork. I didn't clean out the attic. I threw what I could into the hatchback, locked the front door, and drove until the mountains were in my rearview mirror. We sold the house a few months later to a developer who wanted to turn the land into vacation cabins. I didn't go back for the closing. Sometimes, late at night in my apartment 2 states away, I'll wake up convinced I just heard a whistle in the stairwell. 2 notes, high, low. I tell myself it's just someone's phone or a neighbor coming home late. I tell myself the thing I saw in the woods belongs to that mountain, to that third ridge, to that cairn with its skull and its tally mark. I tell myself that if I don't go back, it can't follow me. But the last time I checked the satellite view on an online map, you could see the clearing behind my grandmother's old house. The forest, the slope, even the faint circle where the trees thin out. In the exact center of that circle, there's a dark mark the resolution isn't good enough to clarify. Shadow, rock, or something stacked. If you ever find yourself hiking in western North Carolina and an old-timer tells you not to go past the third ridge, listen. If your GPS starts spinning, if the woods go quiet, if you see a pile of stones with a skull perched on top, turn around. And if you hear 2 notes, high and low, coming from the trees, don't look for the whistler. Because in the Appalachians, some things don't mimic people, people mimic them, and they're very good at waiting for someone who doesn't know which side of the mountain belongs to them. Story 4. It started in late September when I was conducting a fall survey in a remote section of the Daniel Boone National Forest, about 15 miles northeast of Whitley City. The area had been flagged for unusual activity, dead animals found in clusters, strange markings. On trees, reports from locals of something moving through the hollers that wasn't right. Most of it was probably nothing. Appalachian folklore tends to inflate itself, but it was my job to check. I'd planned a 5-day camping trip, moving through 3 different survey zones, collecting scat samples and taking GPS waypoints. Standard work. I'd done it 100 times. My backpack had food, water, a sat phone, a quality tent and all. The gear I needed to spend a week alone in the woods without issue. What I didn't have was any sense of what was actually out there. The first 2 days were fine, uneventful. I found some deer sign, evidence of a black bear moving through the lower elevations, the usual late summer insect life. The weather was cool but not cold, the sky clear. By day 2 I was in a rhythm, up at dawn, survey work until noon, lunch, and notes taking in early afternoon, then another push until dark. On the evening of day 2, I made camp in a small clearing about 2 miles off the main ridge trail. I built a careful fire, ate some rehydrated stew, and settled into my tent around 8 p.m. The night was clear enough that I could hear the creek below the clearing, the occasional owl, the wind moving through the canopy. Sometime after midnight, I woke up because something had changed in the acoustic environment. The creek was still running, the wind was still blowing, but all the small sounds, the insects, the frogs, had gone silent. That kind of sudden quiet in a forest usually means a predator nearby. Nothing dramatic, just animals knowing when to shut up and hide. I lay there in my sleeping bag, listening. For maybe 5 minutes there was nothing but the wind and water. Then I heard it, a low rhythmic sound, not quite a grunt, not quite a moan, almost like something breathing through an obstruction. It came from somewhere to the north of my camp, maybe a quarter mile away, moving along a trajectory that suggested it was paralleling the creek. I'd heard plenty of animal calls before. Elk bugles, coyotes singing, even the rare mountain lion's snarl that would make your blood run cold. This wasn't any of them. There was something almost vocal about it, like it was trying to communicate instead of just being an ambient animal sound. I told myself it was a bear with respiratory issues, or a moose, though moose don't range this far south, or just some weird acoustic trick that the rain was playing on night air. I went back to sleep. On day 3, I broke camp and moved to the next survey zone, about 4 miles to the northeast. The trail was steep but well marked. The weather held. By midday, I was in a different part of the forest, older growth, taller trees, the kind of place where the canopy is so thick, the light on the forest floor looks perpetual twilight. I was taking measurements when I noticed the trees. Not all of them, just certain ones scattered throughout the zone, maybe one every 50 yards or so. Each one had been marked with deep claw marks, gouged lines that ran from roughly head height down to chest level. The marks weren't fresh, they were weathered, bleached pale by sun and weather. But they were deliberate, regular, like something was maintaining a territorial boundary. The marks were too high to be from a bear, too deep to be from a mountain lion. And the spacing was wrong, too precise, too intentional. I took photographs, noted GPS coordinates, and documented everything in my field journal. Whatever had made those marks had been here repeatedly over a long period of time, and it had wanted something to know about it. That night, I made camp in a tighter spot, more defensible, less exposed. I stayed up late, nursing coffee, reading a novel I'd brought along. The forest around me felt different from the night before. More present somehow, more aware. Around 2 a.m., I heard it again, the same low breathing sound, closer this time. It was circling the camp, or seemed to be. The sound would come from the west, then fade, then appear from the south. Not frantic, not aggressive, just observational. I made noise, clanged a pot, shouted, turned on my flashlight and waved it at the trees. The sound stopped. For the rest of the night, there was nothing but normal forest sounds, but I didn't sleep. On day 4, I decided to cut the trip short. I told myself it was because the weather was shifting. True enough, I could see clouds building on the horizon, but really I wanted out of those woods. The whole place had started to feel wrong, the way the trees crowded together in certain areas. The fact that I hadn't seen a single deer or rabbit or anything larger than a squirrel in 3 days, despite being in prime habitat. It was like the forest was empty, or like everything had left because something else had arrived. I packed up my camp and started down the ridge trail toward the main Forest Service road. The descent was steep but manageable. After about an hour, I passed through an area of blowdown, trees knocked over from an old storm, creating a tangle of logs and branches that had partially regrown with brush. I was climbing over a particularly large fallen trunk when I saw it. Scat, animal droppings, scattered across the dead wood like someone had deliberately displayed them. I knelt down to examine them closer. The sample was maybe 4 inches long, tapered, with the consistency of something that had digested raw meat. The color was dark, not black, but very dark brown. There was hair in it, which told me whatever had produced it was a carnivore, and a consistent one. The hair all looked like deer fur, but the shape was wrong. Most large predator scat is either rounded or tapered at one end. This was pinched in the middle, like something with an unusual digestive system, or possibly something that spent an extended period keeping the feces in its body before expelling it. The ends came to actual points. I photographed it, collected a sample in a sterile bag, and kept moving. I should have turned around right then. Instead, I told myself I was being paranoid and pushed onward. The trail descended into a small ravine, crossed a tributary of the creek, and climbed the far side. This was a bottleneck, the only real way through the terrain for miles in either direction. As I emerged from the ravine onto the opposite slope, I noticed something that stopped me cold. Prints, not in mud, but pressed into the soft earth of the trail, where the ground was a mix of moss and clay. Handprints, human-sized. But the fingers were too long, the palm too narrow, and there were 4 of them in a row, as if something had knelt down and pressed both hands flat into the ground, one right after another. They were fresh. The edges hadn't dried or started to crumble. They'd been made sometime in the last few hours. I stood there for maybe a minute, just staring at them. My pulse was loud in my ears. Then I heard the breathing sound again. Not distant this time. Close, maybe 50 yards away, somewhere in the trees upslope from me. High, low, high, low. No, wait, not breathing. Whistling. 2 distinct notes echoing down through the canopy. I spun around, shining my flashlight toward the sound. Nothing but trees, shadows. The understory too thick to see through. "Hello," I called. "Forest Service. Identify yourself." Silence. The whistle came again, from a different direction. To my right now, lower than the first. "I'm armed," I lied. "I had a knife and bear spray but no gun, and I have satellite communication. Someone knows where I am." The second part was true. I'd checked in on my sat phone that morning. For a moment, nothing. The forest held its breath. Then, from multiple directions, at least 3, maybe 4, the whistle repeated. High, low, but not in unison, slightly offset, overlapping, like an echo that wasn't coming from a single source. I didn't walk the rest of the way down the trail. I dropped the pack, kept my GPS and sat phone, and moved downslope at an angle, crashing through brush that would slow anything trying to follow. I didn't care about the noise I was making. I just wanted down and out. The ravine bottom was treacherous, loose stones, slick moss, tree roots everywhere. I half fell, half scrambled, using my hands to keep from pitching into the creek. When I finally reached the Forest Service road, about 40 minutes later, I was bleeding from 3 different places, and my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I called for a ranger to come pick me up. While I waited, I sat in my car with the engine running and all the doors locked, periodically looking over my shoulder at the tree line. The ranger showed up 2 hours later and found me like that, still staring at the woods like something was going to emerge. The official report says I came down with acute altitude sickness and had to terminate the survey. That I was disoriented and might have imagined some of the sounds. Dehydration and isolation can do weird things to the mind, the ranger told me. Happens more than you'd think out there. I didn't argue. I turned in my samples, uploaded my field photos, and took a 2-week leave from work. When I came back, I requested desk work instead of field work. Less money, less interesting, but it kept me out of the woods. The photos I took, the marked trees, the scat sample, the handprints, went into the department database. I never saw them again. I've asked about them since. The database has them cataloged, but nobody seems to have done anything with them. A year later, I got a call from a researcher at the University of Kentucky. She'd been going through archived field data and noticed my survey notes. She wanted to talk about what I'd seen. We met in a coffee shop in Lexington. "You're not the first person to report this," she told me. It wasn't a question. "Report what?" I asked. "Unusual activity in that part of the forest. Unidentified vocalizations. Strange markings on trees. Scat that doesn't match any known species in the region." She pulled out a folder and spread photographs across the table. "We have records going back 70 years. Every few decades, someone camps in that particular zone and comes out with a story very similar to yours. The photos showed trees marked like mine had been, scat samples that looked virtually identical, and one, a Polaroid from 1986, faded and water-stained, showed a print in mud that looked almost exactly like the handprints I'd photographed. "What is it?" I asked. "We don't know," she said. "We've speculated. Undocumented primate species, feral human population living in the deeper hollers, mass hallucination caused by some environmental factor. There's a theory from someone at UK's biology department that it might be a relict population of Gigantopithecus that somehow survived the Ice Age in isolated cave systems in Appalachia, but that's..." She trailed off, shaking her head. "That's not serious science. That's science fiction." "But something is out there," I said. "Yes," she agreed. "Something is out there." I quit the Forest Service 3 months later, got a job with an environmental consulting firm based in Louisville. I haven't been back into the woods in any serious capacity since that trip. Sometimes, though, I'll be sitting in traffic or in a meeting, and I'll hear a sound that reminds me of that 2-note whistle. My hands will go cold. My breathing will get shallow. I've learned not to camp in the Appalachian backcountry. I've learned not to hike remote trails alone. And I've learned that sometimes the things we dismiss as folklore or misidentification or mass hallucination might just be things we don't want to understand. There are places in those mountains where the trees are marked with warnings, where something maintains a territory with the patience of something very old, where the silence comes not because there's nothing there, but because everything there knows to be quiet. If you ever find yourself surveying or hiking or camping in the deep hollers of Kentucky, and you see those marks on the trees, deep gouges, deliberate patterns like a boundary being maintained, don't dismiss it as bare activity. And if you hear the whistle, the 2 notes overlapping from different directions, don't try to identify the source, just leave. Because some knowledge, once you have it, changes you. And some places in Appalachia remember everyone who's been there, especially the ones who paid close attention. Story 5. My name is Thomas Garrett, and I work as a delivery driver for a regional package service out of Beckley, West Virginia. I've been doing this job for 11 years, running the same routes, stopping at the same houses, knowing most of my regulars by name. It's not glamorous, but it's steady work, and I know these mountains like the lines on my own hands. Until last month, I thought I knew everything about the roads I drove. My route covers a territory that stretches from the main highway out into increasingly remote areas, rural addresses, mountain, communities that barely show up on GPS, places where the pavement eventually gives way to gravel and then to dirt. Most of it's fine. I deliver packages, collect signatures, and move on. But there's one address I've never been able to deliver to. It's listed in the system as 437 Hollow Creek Road, somewhere in the unincorporated area outside of Mullins. The GPS has coordinates for it, but the directions have never quite worked. I've tried the address at least a dozen times over the years, and each time I either get lost on roads that shouldn't, it'd be confusing, or the turn I need doesn't exist, or I end up looping back to places I've already been. Other drivers have complained about it too. One guy quit rather than keep trying to find it. Another swore the address didn't actually exist, that it was a database error that nobody had bothered to fix. But the packages keep coming. Usually they're small, padded envelopes, small boxes, nothing that requires a signature. The return address is always different, which is weird. And they're always addressed to the same person, M. Hewitt. I'd stopped trying to deliver them about 5 years ago. I just marked them as unable to locate address and send them back. But 2 weeks ago, I got pulled into a meeting with my supervisor. Apparently the customer, whoever M. Hewitt is, had filed complaints, said I wasn't trying hard enough, said I was being lazy. My supervisor told me to make one more attempt, really try, follow the GPS, take my time, ask locals for directions if I needed to. So on a Wednesday afternoon, I loaded the package, a small box, maybe 6 inches, square, no return address this time, and drove out toward Hollow Creek Road. The GPS took me off the main highway onto progressively smaller roads. 2-lane became 1 lane, paved became gravel. Eventually, the road narrowed to barely wide enough for my van, with trees crowding in from both sides. The GPS kept insisting I was on the right route, even as every instinct I had said the roads were leading nowhere. After about 20 minutes of this, the GPS announced that my destination was on the left, 50 yards ahead. I didn't see anything. No mailbox, no driveway, no indication of habitation, just trees and undergrowth, and a steep slope leading down into a hollow thick enough with mist that I couldn't see the bottom. I pulled over anyway and got out. "Hello?" I called. "Package delivery." My voice disappeared into the trees like they were absorbing sound. I waited maybe 30 seconds, then tried again. "If anyone's here, I have a delivery." Nothing. The woods didn't even have birds. The silence was absolute. I was turning to go back to the van when I noticed something about 50 yards into the trees. A clearing, barely visible through the undergrowth. And in that clearing, what looked like a structure. I told myself it was probably just an old hunting blind or a storage shed. Something abandoned. But the packages kept coming to this address, which meant somebody was maintaining this location. Somebody was here. I pushed through the brush, following what might have been a path or might have just been the easiest route through the vegetation. The clearing opened up in front of me, and I stopped. It was a house, or had been. An old structure, maybe from the 50s or 60s, with weathered wood siding and a metal roof gone orange with rust. The windows were boarded up. The front door hung at an angle, partially off its hinges. Around the perimeter, the grass had grown to waist height. Nobody had lived here in decades. I checked my GPS. The coordinates showed me right on top of the address. "This can't be right," I muttered. That's when I noticed the packages. They were stacked on the porch, visible through the gaps in the boarded-up front window. Dozens of them, hundreds maybe, piled against the walls inside, visible through cracks in the wood. Some looked recent, some looked like they'd been there for years. My skin went cold. I set my delivery down on the porch steps, took a photo of the address on the house for my records, and backed away. I was halfway back through the brush when I heard the sound. It was coming from inside the house, a long, low moan, like something in pain or distress. Not quite human, not quite animal. I didn't wait to hear it again. Back at the van, I sat for a moment, hands shaking slightly on the steering wheel. I tried to call my supervisor, but there was no cell signal. Of course there wasn't. I drove back out the way I came, and it took me nearly 40 minutes to find my way back to the main highway. Roads that had seemed straightforward on the way in became a maze of turns and confusing intersections on the way out. At the warehouse that night, I filed a report, said I'd located the address, but the structure appeared abandoned, that packages were accumulating on the property, that I'd left the delivery as requested. My supervisor asked if I'd gotten a signature. "Nobody was there," I said. "It looks like nobody's been there in years." He frowned at his computer. "The system shows the last package was delivered there 2 days ago," he said. "According to the driver log, it was signed for by M. Hewitt." I didn't say anything to that. I just waited for him to dismiss me, but he didn't. He kept staring at his screen, confused. "That's weird," he said finally. "According to the delivery history, someone's been signing for packages at that address for 23 years, without interruption. Monthly deliveries at minimum, sometimes weekly. Maybe it's a mail forwarding situation," I suggested. "Maybe," he said, but he didn't sound convinced. I asked to be taken off that route. I told him the road conditions were too difficult, that the address wasn't reliably locatable, that it was taking up too much time. He didn't argue. He just reassigned me to a different area. But I still think about that house. I think about the packages stacking up on the porch. I think about the moan I heard coming from inside. I think about the fact that someone, for 23 years, has been having packages delivered to a place that doesn't appear to be inhabited by any living person. Last week, I was driving near that area for a different delivery, and I made a wrong turn. Suddenly, I was back on the road leading to Hollow Creek, and I could see the turnoff that led to that clearing. I told myself I wouldn't look. I told myself it wasn't any of my business. But as I passed, I glanced down that narrow road. There was a figure standing at the edge of the tree line. Tall, impossibly thin, wrapped in something that might have been clothes or might have been shadows. It was looking at my van. I didn't stop. I didn't slow down. I just drove faster until the turnoff disappeared behind me. When I got home that night, I looked up the house online, tried to find records of it. There's almost nothing. A property tax listing from the 80s, a deed from 1957. One local blog post about abandoned Appalachian homes mentions it, with a photo that looks like it was taken in the 70s. Same house, same boarded windows, same state of decay. The blog post has a comment from someone with a username Mewit437. It says, "Still here, still waiting. The packages help. Please don't stop sending them." It was posted in 2003. I've thought about quitting my job, about transferring to a different region entirely, but part of me knows that wouldn't help. That whatever's in that house, whatever's been receiving packages for 23 years, it knows where I am now. If you ever see a delivery truck take a wrong turn onto a mountain road, or a driver trying to locate an address that doesn't quite exist, don't be surprised. And if you ever get a package back marked unable to locate address, don't be curious about where it was supposed to go, because some places in Appalachia don't want to be found. And some things living in those places have learned to order things online. They're very patient. They've been ordering for a long time, and they always remember the drivers who come close. Story 6. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and I spent 3 years working as a social services caseworker in rural eastern Kentucky, visiting families in remote areas to check on child welfare, elder care, and general living conditions. It was difficult work: poverty, addiction, domestic violence, all the things that don't make the news but destroy lives in small communities. Most days I felt like I was applying band-aids to deep wounds. But I took the job seriously. I showed up, I listened, I tried to help where I could, until I met the Hollister family and learned that some situations aren't meant to be helped. The Hollister name came up in my caseload in late March, flagged by a school nurse who'd noticed that the youngest child, a 6-year-old named Emma, had started coming to school in increasingly poor condition. Unwashed, malnourished, with bruises that didn't match the stories she told. The school suspected abuse. They called it in. My job was to investigate. The address was in the deep hollers outside Harlan, about 40 minutes from my office, a rambling property, set back from a county road, accessible only by a steep gravel drive that wound through dense forest. The GPS on my phone started losing signal about a mile before I arrived. The house itself was a collection of structures that had accumulated over time: a main cabin, additions, built haphazardly, a collapsing barn, various outbuildings in states of advanced decay. There were maybe 24 cars scattered around the property, all of them gutted or rusting or both. The yard was dirt, churned to mud by foot traffic and rain. I parked, grabbed my notebook and my phone, and walked to the front door. A woman answered after my second knock. She was maybe 40 but looked 60, thin, weathered, with missing teeth and eyes that didn't quite focus. She introduced herself as Patricia Hollister, the children's grandmother. "I'm here about Emma," I said, keeping my voice neutral and professional. "The school has some concerns about her welfare. I'd like to speak with her and conduct a home assessment." Patricia's expression shifted, not to anger or defensiveness, like most parents when CPS shows up, but to something that looked almost like fear. "Emma's fine," she said. "She's just a clumsy kid, always falling, always getting hurt, nothing to worry about." "I'd like to verify that," I said. "Is she here?" Patricia called over her shoulder, and a small, thin girl appeared from the interior of the house. Emma. Her hair was matted, her clothes were visibly stained. When she looked at me, her eyes had that hollow quality I'd learned to recognize, the look of a child who's learned not to expect help. "Can I talk to Emma alone?" I asked. Patricia's jaw tightened. "She stays with family," she said. That was my first red flag. Most grandparents cooperate, even the ones who've got something to hide. But this woman, there was something about her resistance that felt different, more primal. "I'll need to see the home," I said instead. The living conditions, sleeping arrangements, kitchen facilities. Patricia didn't want to let me in, but she couldn't legally refuse. Caseworkers have broad authority to investigate suspected abuse, so she stepped aside and let me pass. The interior of the house was worse than I expected. The smell hit me first, a combination of backed-up plumbing, mold, animal, waste, and something underneath it all that I couldn't quite identify. The floors were sticky. The walls were covered in something dark that might have been mold or might have been something else. There were no modern appliances, no running water that I could see, no electricity except for a generator humming in the corner. In the kitchen, if you could call it that, I found evidence of food preparation on a wood stove, pots that hadn't been cleaned in what looked like weeks, dried blood on a cutting board. "How many people live here?" I asked. "About 15, Patricia said flatly. "Multi-generational family. We keep to ourselves." 15 people in this space? I looked around. Where do they sleep? Upstairs, downstairs, various rooms. I requested to see the bedrooms. Patricia moved slowly, like she was considering refusing, then led me toward a narrow staircase. Halfway up, I noticed something that made me stop. The walls were covered in marks, not wallpaper or paint, actual scratches and gouges in the wood, arranged in patterns. Vertical lines, grouped marks, deliberate spacing, like a tally, or a language I didn't understand. "What are these?" I asked. "Old," Patricia said. "House is old. Things wear." But the marks didn't look like wear. They looked intentional, recent even. Upstairs was worse. The rooms were cramped, overcrowded, with sleeping mats on the floor instead of beds. The air was thick and foul. I counted 8 sleeping spaces in 3 rooms, but Patricia said 15 people lived here. That meant either some of them didn't sleep in beds, or some of them didn't sleep at all. In one room, I found children's drawings on the walls, crude, childish crayon pictures, but the subjects were disturbing. Stick figures with elongated limbs, shapes that weren't quite human, a recurring image of something tall standing over smaller figures. "These are Emma's?" I asked. "Kids draw," Patricia said. "Kids imagine things." But the drawings all looked recent, and they all told the same story. I completed my assessment, wrote down everything I'd observed, and told Patricia that I'd be filing a report and that a follow-up visit would be scheduled. I asked to speak with Emma one more time, alone. In the kitchen, while Patricia was upstairs, I knelt down to Emma's eye level. "Is someone hurting you?" I asked quietly. "You can tell me. You're safe." Emma's eyes went to the doorway to make sure no one was listening. "The things in the woods come in at night," she whispered. "They bring food. Sometimes they take people. Grandma says we have to be nice to them, says they're family." My stomach turned to ice. "What things in the woods?" I asked. "I don't know," Emma said. "They're tall. They smell bad. They make sounds that hurt my ears. Sometimes they sound like people, sometimes like animals, sometimes like nothing at all." "Where do they sleep?" I asked. "In the hollow," Emma said. "There's a place deeper in the woods. Grandma and the others go there sometimes. They come back different." I took Emma's hand and looked at her more carefully. She was malnourished, yes, but she also had a quality of wrongness about her that went beyond simple neglect. Something in the way she moved, something in her eyes. "Emma, how old are you?" I asked. 6, she said. "When your birthday?" She seemed confused by the question. "Don't know," she said. "Grandma says I've been 6 for a long time. I don't know what would have happened if Patricia hadn't returned to the kitchen at that moment. Maybe nothing. Maybe I would have kept pressing, kept asking questions, kept trying to understand." Patricia stood in the doorway, looking at me with an expression I can only describe as pity. "You should go now," she said quietly. "You should leave and not come back. This property is now under investigation," I said, standing up, pulling out my phone to call my supervisor. "And these children will be evaluated for removal. That won't work here," Patricia said. She wasn't threatening me. She was just stating a fact. "This place doesn't answer to your laws, your government. your rules. What happens here happens because it's supposed to, because things made arrangements a long time ago. I left, got back in my car, drove as fast as the gravel road would allow. My phone didn't get signal until I was back on the county road. The first thing I did was call my supervisor and report everything. Suspected abuse, inadequate living conditions, possible neglect, and what I could only describe as concerning statements from a child regarding predatory behavior in the area. I expected him to take immediate action, to file for an emergency custody order, to contact law enforcement. Instead, there was a long silence on the other end of the phone. "Sarah," he said carefully, "how long have you been in this department?" 3 years, I said. "Have you filed reports on the Hollister property before?" I checked my records. I hadn't, and looking at the caseload history, I saw that no caseworker had filed on that address in over a decade. Before that, there were sporadic reports going back to the 90s, but nothing recent, nothing active. "There's a reason that," my supervisor said slowly, "that address gets flagged but never followed up on. There's a reason caseworkers in this county have learned to avoid that particular property." "What reason?" I asked. He didn't answer directly. "File your report," he said, "but understand that it won't go anywhere. The family will refuse entry next time. We don't have grounds for forced removal without evidence of acute danger. And the children will be in school tomorrow, probably looking fine, probably saying everything is normal, and there's nothing we can do." He was right. I filed the report. I documented everything. Within 2 days, Patricia had filed a counter-complaint, claiming I'd been trespassing, being invasive, making unfounded accusations. The school nurse was contacted and told that the marks on Emma were consistent with a bleeding disorder, not abuse. Emma came to school the next day looking healthier. Her clothes were clean, her hair was brushed. There was no sign of the child I'd seen. I was told the case was closed due to insufficient evidence and the family's cooperation with the investigation. I stayed in that job for 8 more months before I quit. In that time, I learned the truth about the Hollister property, not from official sources, from other caseworkers, from old-timers in the community, from whispered conversations at the office. The Hollister family isn't a family, it's a collective, a multi-generational community that's existed in those woods for possibly longer than the county itself. They exist in a kind of parallel to normal society. They have children, but not in the conventional way. They age differently. They interact with something in those hollers that doesn't have a name in our world. And the state doesn't interfere with them because at some point in the past, an understanding was reached. CPS stays away. Law enforcement stays away. In exchange, the Hollisters stay contained within their territory and don't expand their operations. Emma wasn't a victim being abused. She was currency, a negotiated point in an arrangement that predates the social services system by centuries. I tried to report this to the state police, to Child Protective Services at a higher level. Nobody took it seriously. Nobody wanted to acknowledge what I was describing. So I left Kentucky, got a job in Ohio, in an urban area where the problems are straightforward: drugs, poverty, domestic violence. Things that make sense, things that can be addressed through proper channels and institutional responses. But sometimes late at night, I think about Emma, about the drawings on the walls, about the way her eyes didn't focus quite right, about the fact that she'd been 6 for a long time. I wonder if she's still there, if she's still 6, if the arrangement is still holding. And I wonder how many other properties in how many other remote corners of Appalachia have similar understandings in place. If you ever work in social services or law enforcement or any system meant to protect people, and you encounter a property that nobody wants to investigate, a family that nobody wants to touch, a situation that everyone agrees to leave alone, don't push, because some arrangements were made long before we built our systems, and some communities have negotiated a peace with things we don't have names for. Disturbing that peace is a lot more dangerous than looking the other way.